Imagine the skies of a future conflict. Radar screens glow. AWACS crews whisper into headsets. Somewhere high above the clouds, three shadows move in silence. One is American. One is Russian. One is Chinese. F-35. Su-57. J-20. Tonight, we're not just comparing numbers on a spec sheet. We're going to tell the story of three jets that symbolize three visions of air power. Three different ideas of how to fight and win the wars of tomorrow. Whether you're listening in the car, at the gym, or late at night with your headphones on, I want you to be able to see these aircraft in your mind, to feel the tension of a radar lock, to hear the quiet hum of a stealth jet slipping past enemy defenses. In this episode, we'll break down how each jet was designed, what it's really good at, where its weaknesses are, and how they might actually perform if they ever met in the same sky. Not the fanboy version, but the cold, strategic version that planners worry about in war rooms. So, buckle up. Welcome to F-35 versus Su-57 versus J-20, a three-way showdown for control of the future battlefield. Let's start with the basics. Who are these three characters in our story? First, the F-35 Lightning II. Born in the United States, but raised by an entire alliance. It's not just an American jet. It's flown or ordered by more than a dozen countries, from Europe to Asia. Think of it as the iPhone of fighter jets. A platform, a flying computer, constantly updated, constantly upgraded, and plugged into a huge ecosystem. Then we have the Su-57, NATO codename Felon. This is Russia's answer to Western stealth. On paper, it mixes stealth features with extreme agility and powerful missiles. It's the showman of the trio, designed to pull high-G maneuvers, twist in the sky, and look terrifying in an air show. And finally, China's J-20, the mighty dragon. Long range, menacing, built not just to fight other fighters, but to threaten tankers, AWACS aircraft, and ships far from China's shores. It's less about dogfighting tricks and more about strategic reach. Three jets, three doctrines, three very different ideas of what dominance in the air actually means. Before we dive deeper into each jet, we need one simple question answered. What does fifth-generation fighter actually mean? People love to throw that term around like it's magic. Fifth gen. Next gen. But what are we really talking about? At its core, a fifth-generation fighter is built around four main pillars: stealth, sensors, data fusion, and networking. Stealth means the aircraft is designed to be hard to see on radar, especially from the front. Not invisible, but much harder to detect and track until it's too late. Sensors mean the jet is covered in radar, infrared systems, and electronic ears that constantly listen to the battlefield. Data fusion means the jet doesn't just show the pilot 100 random signals. It combines them into one clear picture, like turning messy raw data into a single, clean minimap in a video game. And networking means the jet is part of a team. It shares what it sees with other jets, ships, drones, and ground units. Winning in modern air combat is less about one superplane and more about who has the best system. Keep those four pillars in mind, because they're the lens we'll use to judge the F-35, Su-57, and J-20. Let's zoom in on the F-35 first. If these three jets were characters in a movie, the F-35 would be the quiet strategist. It doesn't look as dramatic as a Su-57 doing Cobra maneuvers, and it doesn't have the same mysterious aura as the J-20. But it has something far more dangerous: information. The F-35 was designed to be a quarterback in the sky. It can sneak close to enemy airspace, detect threats long before they see it, and then pass that data to other assets. Sometimes, the F-35 doesn't even have to fire. It can let older jets or ships launch the missiles using its targeting data. It also comes in three main versions: the F-35A, the standard Air Force version; the F-35B, which can take off from short runways and even land vertically on small decks; and the F-35C, optimized for large aircraft carriers. This flexibility is what makes the F-35 especially scary. It's not just one aircraft in one air force. It's a family of jets spread across NATO and key United States allies, all sharing data, all learning from each other's missions. Every year, its software updates. Its weapons evolve. Its tactics adapt. It is, quite literally, a work in progress that keeps getting better. Now, let's talk about the Su-57. On paper, it's Russia's answer to the F-22 and F-35. In reality, it represents something slightly different. The Su-57 continues a long Russian tradition. Make the jet agile. Make it powerful. Make it capable of pulling insane maneuvers that look impossible to Western pilots. It uses thrust vectoring engines, meaning the exhaust nozzles can move and point in different directions. This allows the jet to pivot, twist, and bleed speed rapidly in close-in dogfights. The kind of fight where missiles are already in the air and pilots are on the edge of blackout. Russia has also advertised advanced radar and sensor systems on the Su-57, including side-facing arrays to detect stealthy targets from unusual angles. But here's the challenge. Stealth is not something you just add to a design later. It has to be baked in from the first line on the drawing board. And many analysts believe the Su-57 traded some stealth for agility and versatility. So in our story, the Su-57 is the knife fighter, deadly up close, flashy, but maybe more vulnerable in the long range, radar-driven duels that modern air combat is shifting toward. Then there's the J-20, China's mighty dragon. If the F-35 is the quarterback and the Su-57 is the knife fighter, the J-20 is the long-range hunter. China didn't design the J-20 primarily to dance in close-in dogfights. It built it to shape the map. Long range. Big internal fuel capacity. Space for large air-to-air missiles. All of this points to a jet that wants to reach far out and kill high-value targets. Think tankers. Think AWACS. Think surveillance aircraft that allow the United States and its allies to see deep into contested regions. Take those out, and even the best F-35 fleet suddenly has shorter legs and fewer eyes. The J-20 also sends a message. China is no longer just copying older designs. It's building its own concepts, tailored for its geography and its strategy in the Western Pacific. Is it as stealthy as an F-35 from all angles? Probably not. Are its engines as advanced as what the United States runs? Also doubtful, at least for now. But that's not the only question. The real question is, does the J-20 do the job China needs it to do? And that's where things get interesting. Now that we've met all three jets, let's begin the real comparison. And we'll start with the most hyped feature: stealth. Stealth is like playing hide and seek with radar. If you can't be seen, you can't be shot. The F-35 is widely considered the most refined stealth platform of the three. Its shape, its internal weapon bays, its coatings, and even tiny details like panel alignment are all tuned to reduce radar reflections. It's especially optimized for low radar visibility from the front, where radars usually scan for incoming threats. The J-20 also uses stealth shaping, with a chiseled nose, canted tail surfaces, and internal weapon bays. From some angles, it looks like it was inspired by a mix of American stealth concepts and Chinese innovation. But it still uses design choices, like canards, that can complicate stealth performance. The Su-57, meanwhile, has stealth elements, but far more exposed surfaces, panel gaps, and external shapes that suggest stealth was balanced against other priorities. In a pure who gets spotted first contest, most analysts would bet on the F-35, then the J-20, then the Su-57. And in modern air combat, being first to see often means being first to kill. But stealth is only half the story. The other half is what your sensors can do with that stealth. The F-35's radar, infrared search and track system, and electronic warfare suite are all tied together by powerful onboard computers. Instead of giving the pilot a cluttered mess of contacts, the jet fuses everything into a single, clear picture. The pilot sees not just where threats are, but what they probably are. That's a huge mental advantage. You're not overwhelmed. You're in control. The J-20 is believed to carry an advanced AESA radar and growing electronic warfare capabilities. China has been pouring resources into sensors and data links, especially for operations near its coastline and island chains. Think of the J-20 as a long-range node in a much bigger surveillance and targeting network. The Su-57, on paper, also fields multiple radar arrays and infrared systems. In theory, this could help it spot stealthy targets that rely on narrow radar visibility from specific angles. But again, the question is not just what you install. It's how well it all works together, and how mature the software, training, and doctrine behind it really are. Now, let's talk about the classic fighter metrics: speed, maneuverability, and raw performance. On paper, all three jets are fast enough to go supersonic. That's not what separates them. What really matters is how they fight at different distances. The Su-57 leans hardest into agility. Its thrust vectoring allows brutal turns and post-stall maneuvers that can completely flip a close-in fight. If, somehow, an F-35 or J-20 ends up merged into a visual range dogfight with a Su-57, things get very dangerous very quickly. The F-35, by contrast, was never designed to win air shows. It was designed to avoid fair fights. It wants to kill you before you even realize it's there. The J-20 sits in between. Not as acrobatic as the Su-57, not as stealth-optimized as the F-35, but built to fight where China cares most. Over long distances, with long-range missiles, backed by a growing web of sensors on land, sea, and in the air. Up next, we'll stop looking at these jets in isolation and start dropping them into real-world scenarios. Because that's where the differences become brutally clear. Let's drop our first scenario onto the map. Imagine a crisis on NATO's eastern flank. F-35s are flying combat air patrols, backed by AWACS and ground-based radar. Across the border, Su-57s are on alert, plugged into Russian air defenses and long-range missile systems. This would not be a clean one-on-one duel. It would be a messy, layered fight. F-35s would try to sneak forward, using their stealth and sensors to quietly map Russian positions. Su-57s would likely stay closer to friendly air defenses, using their agility and powerful missiles as a deterrent. The first question isn't who dogfights who. The first question is who gets good information first. If the F-35s can see the Su-57s before they're detected, they can launch long-range missiles and turn away before Russian pilots even realize they're under attack. But the Russians wouldn't just sit there. They'd use ground radars, passive sensors, and electronic warfare to try to strip away the advantage from the F-35s. They'd push the Su-57s into positions where they could ambush or force NATO jets into threat zones covered by surface-to-air missiles. So in this scenario, the F-35's biggest strength is staying hidden and hunting from a distance. The Su-57's strength is turning any close encounter into a knife fight where its agility can shine. Which style wins depends heavily on who controls the timing and the ranges of the first shots. Now, let's slow that scenario down to real time. Picture a pair of F-35s cruising high, their radars working in careful, quiet modes. Their pilots watch a fuse display that feels almost like a tactical video game. Contacts appear as clean symbols, tagged with confidence levels and likely identities. Far away, Su-57 pilots are staring at more traditional displays. They may see electronic noise, ambiguous returns, maybe a radar blip, maybe nothing. The F-35s might choose to remain completely silent, letting other sensors in the network paint the picture for them. A drone, a ship, a satellite, all feeding data into the same web. At some point, someone orders a shot. A long-range missile leaves its rail, guided first by the launching aircraft, then by its own seeker. The Su-57 pilot may get only a few seconds of warning. Then comes a violent defensive maneuver, chaff, flares, electronic countermeasures. Could a highly agile Su-57 outmaneuver a missile? Sometimes, yes. Could it win a close-in fight if it survived the first volley? Also yes. But the entire Western strategy is built around never letting it get that comfortable. That's the big theme you'll hear again and again. The F-35 is designed to shape the engagement before the enemy even realizes it's started. Now shift the map thousands of kilometers east into the Western Pacific. Here, the key matchup isn't F-35 versus Su-57. It's F-35 versus J-20. Imagine a tense standoff over the South China Sea or near Taiwan. Chinese radars on the mainland, on islands, and at sea are sweeping the skies. J-20s are launched to push back any foreign aircraft that come too close. On the other side, U.S. and Allied F-35s are trying to do something very similar to what we just described in Europe. Slip in, build a picture, share that picture, and be ready to fire first. But the geography here changes everything. China is fighting close to home. Its air bases are nearby. Its missile batteries are on land. Its ships, drones, and sensors are spread across the region. The J-20's job is not just to tangle with fighters. It's to reach out and threaten the tankers and AWACS aircraft that keep F-35s in the fight. Take those down, and suddenly the F-35s have less fuel, less awareness, and fewer options. So in the Pacific, the J-20 isn't just a fighter. It's a spear pointed at the nervous system of the American air campaign. Let's walk through how that Pacific scenario might feel from a pilot's perspective. You're flying an F-35 from a carrier or a distant airbase. You know that somewhere out there, beyond radar range, J-20s are hunting. You also know that if you push too far forward, you move into the kill zones of Chinese ship-launched and land-based missiles. Your displays show a constantly updating mosaic of the battle space. Surface ships, unknown emitters, possible stealth contacts. You and your wingmen are trying to stay just close enough to be useful, but far enough to avoid being pinned down. Now, flip perspectives. You're in a J-20 cockpit. Your mission brief is clear. Find and kill the enablers. The tankers that refuel fighters. The AWACS that see over the horizon. You rely on a mix of ground-based radar, over-the-horizon systems, and data from other aircraft and ships. You might not see the F-35s themselves, but you might see the effects of their presence. Disrupted radar pictures, electronic noise, gaps in your coverage that feel a little too intentional. In this cat-and-mouse game, both sides are trying to pull the other into a bad trade. Lose a tanker here. Lose an early warning aircraft there. Slowly, your side's ability to control the air shrinks. That's why, in any F-35 versus J-20 matchup, you can't just ask who wins the dogfight. You have to ask who still has their support network intact after the first week of fighting. There's another invisible layer to all of this. Electronic warfare. Modern fighters don't just shoot missiles. They also jam radars, confuse sensors, and try to blind each other electronically. The F-35 carries an advanced electronic warfare suite that can detect, classify, and respond to enemy emissions at long range. It can act almost like a mini electronic attack aircraft, finding the enemy's eyes and then helping to close them. China and Russia are not standing still here either. Both have invested heavily in jammers, decoys, and anti-stealth radars that operate at lower frequencies. These systems may not give a perfect firing solution, but they can provide enough cues to launch missiles or vector fighters. In a real conflict, the air would be thick with invisible attacks, spoofed signals, false targets, bursts of noise designed to make your radar picture look like a broken TV. This is where integration really matters. A jet that fuses data from multiple sensors and networks can sometimes see through the chaos. It can discard what doesn't fit and hold on to what does. So when you hear arguments online like this radar is more powerful or that missile has a longer range, remember, the real battle is not just radar versus radar. It's system versus system. It's whose network stays effective under heavy electronic and cyber attack. Let's talk about something far less glamorous, but absolutely decisive. Training and doctrine. You can give two pilots the exact same jet and get very different results. It depends on how often they train, how realistic their exercises are, and what their commanders expect them to do in a fight. Western air forces have spent decades building complex, large-scale exercises. Red flag. Integrated training with allies. Simulated fights where pilots are encouraged to push limits and learn from failure. China and Russia are catching up in some areas, building their own large exercises and advanced simulators. But their political systems and military cultures are different. The question is not just can their pilots fly well. It's how much initiative are they allowed to take when the plan starts to fall apart. F-35 pilots trained to think as part of a connected web, to use their jet as a sensor, a shooter, and a coordinator at the same time. Su-57 and J-20 pilots are still integrating their jets into evolving doctrines, with less real-world combat data to learn from. That doesn't mean they're weak pilots. It means they're working with younger systems. Systems that will get better, but that may not yet be as deeply woven into every level of their air forces. In a high-end war, those soft factors can decide whether a pilot survives the first chaotic week or doesn't come home at all. Now, let's zoom out even further. Beyond stealth, beyond sensors, beyond training. Let's talk about something brutally simple. Numbers. A single elite fighter is impressive. 100 of them, sustained, maintained, and upgraded over decades, is a different level of power. The F-35 program is massive. Hundreds already built, many more on the way. Multiple nations flying them, sharing tactics, parts, and software updates. The Su-57, so far, exists in far smaller numbers. It's more of a boutique asset at this stage. That limits how often it can be deployed and how much real-world data Russia can gather to refine it. The J-20 sits in between. China is scaling up production and slowly building a fleet that could eventually be fielded in meaningful numbers across multiple theaters. There's a saying in military history: quantity has a quality all its own. If one side can put 3 or 4 capable jets in the air for every one top-end jet on the other side, the math starts to bite. So when we compare these 3 aircraft, we can't just ask who is better on paper. We have to ask who can afford to lose jets and still keep fighting, and who can keep spare parts, munitions, and trained crews flowing when a war lasts longer than anyone expected. All 3 jets are also moving targets in another sense. They're evolving. The F-35 is receiving new software, new weapons, and eventually new hardware upgrades. Longer-range missiles, smarter bombs, better data links, even potential future engines that could extend its range and performance. China is working to improve the J-20's engines and avionics. Early models likely had limitations in supercruise and reliability. Later models aim to close that gap, giving the J-20 more staying power at high speeds and altitudes. Russia, despite economic and industrial challenges, continues to advertise new variants and upgrades for the Su-57. Better engines, new sensors, more advanced weapons. On top of that, all 3 countries are exploring manned-unmanned teaming. Picture an F-35, Su-57, or J-20 flying with stealthy drones acting as decoys, sensor extensions, or extra missile trucks. That could completely change the risk calculus. Instead of one jet pushing into danger alone, it might send a sacrificial drone ahead. The drone triggers enemy radars and missiles. The manned jet stays back, hidden, ready to exploit any mistakes. So the real question may not be which jet wins today. It might be which ecosystem of jets, drones, software, and strategy evolves fastest over the next 10 to 20 years. At this point, you might be waiting for a simple answer. Just tell me which one is best. But the truth is more interesting than a scoreboard. If you care about raw stealth, network integration, and coalition scale, the F-35 is the heavyweight. If you care about agility and dramatic close-in performance, the Su-57 is the knife in the dark. If you care about long-range influence and shaping the map in the Western Pacific, the J-20 is the rising challenger. Each jet was built to answer a different strategic question. The F-35 asks, how do we help an alliance dominate complex high-tech wars? The Su-57 asks, how do we give a smaller fleet sharp fangs in certain scenarios? The J-20 asks, how do we push rival forces away from our doorstep and threaten their most valuable support assets? So when people online argue about which jet would win in a fair fight, remember this. Real wars are not fair fights. They're messy, asymmetric, full of surprise and confusion. In the next segments of this episode, we're going to dive even deeper. We'll talk weapons, maintenance, export politics, and we'll explore what everyday life looks like for the pilots and ground crews who keep these jets ready. Because the F-35, Su-57, and J-20 are more than machines. They are flying symbols of three very different futures. Let's shift gears and talk about the teeth of these jets. Weapons. At beyond visual range, the F-35's primary punch today comes from missiles like the AIM-120 MRAM, with future upgrades like the AIM-260 on the horizon. These are designed to be launched from stealthy positions, guided by the F-35 sensors and network data. Fire from far. Turn away. Let the missile do the talking. The J-20's main long-range weapon is believed to be the PL-15, a missile often discussed with serious respect in Western circles. It's built to reach far, with an active radar seeker and powerful engine. In theory, it allows the J-20 to threaten support aircraft at impressive distances. The Su-57 fields updated variants of Russian missiles like the R-77 family and very agile short-range weapons like the R-74. Combine that with the jet's maneuverability, and it becomes a serious threat in the merge. All three jets can carry short-range, high-off-boresight missiles that can lock onto targets even when they're not directly in front. So if things get close and messy, it becomes a brutal contest of reaction time, flare timing, and sheer pilot nerve. But remember, the scariest missile is not just the one with the longest range. It's the one you never saw coming, and that loops us right back to stealth, sensors, and who controls the engagement timeline. Weapons are glamorous. Maintenance is not. But maintenance wins wars. The F-35 is sometimes criticized for being complex and demanding behind the scenes. Stealth coding repairs, software updates, specialized equipment. It's not a jet you park in a random hangar with a toolbox and a roll of duct tape. But over time, the F-35 program has been grinding through those early teething issues. Availability rates have improved. Maintenance routines have matured. Allies are sharing lessons on what breaks, when, and why. The Su-57 and J-20 live in a different ecosystem. Russia has long built rugged jets that can survive harsher conditions and simpler airfields. But stealth adds a new layer of complexity, one that demands more precision and specialized facilities. China, on the other hand, is rapidly building the industrial base needed to sustain a modern stealth fleet. New factories, new depots, new training pipelines for technicians. In a prolonged conflict, the question becomes, who can keep their jets flying day after day? Who can rotate airframes, swap parts, and keep stealth coatings intact under combat tempo? An aircraft that is the best on day one means little if half the fleet is grounded by day 30. Sustainment is the unsexy superpower that decides whether high-end fighters remain a real threat or just a paper tiger. Now let's add politics to the mix, because these jets are also diplomatic tools. The F-35 is not just a fighter, it's a club. Nations that buy into the F-35 program are tying their air power future to the United States and its allies. Shared training, shared tactics, shared upgrades. This creates a kind of F-35 alliance inside the alliance. If a crisis breaks out, multiple countries can plug into roughly the same playbook. Their jets can talk to each other more easily. Their pilots have trained in similar ways. The Su-57 so far has not enjoyed the same export success. Some countries showed interest, but cost, sanctions, and questions about timelines have slowed things down. That makes the Su-57 more of a national symbol than a global ecosystem. The J-20, for now, is a strictly Chinese tool. No export, no shared program. Its purpose is to reshape the balance of power in East Asia, not to build a worldwide network. So when you look at the F-35, Su-57, and J-20, you're also looking at three different visions of influence. One builds a coalition. One sharpens a national spear. One quietly shifts regional gravity, pulling neighboring militaries into a new strategic reality. We've talked hardware. We've talked politics. Let's talk humans. Being a fifth-generation fighter pilot is as much about managing information as it is about stick and rudder skills. In an F-35, the cockpit is designed to simplify a brutally complex world. The pilot sees a curated picture, not a chaotic storm of symbols. Western pilots spend thousands of hours in simulators before they ever see combat. They fight virtual J-20s, virtual Su-57s. They practice losing AWACS support, losing tankers, fighting deep inside integrated air defenses. Chinese and Russian pilots are also training hard. They're flying more complex exercises than they did decades ago. They're getting used to sharing the cockpit with AI assistants, advanced data links, and evolving doctrine. But no one really knows how these different training cultures stack up under sustained, high-end combat. We have glimpses. We have exercises. We have small conflicts and proxy wars. But a full-scale clash between these systems has never been tested, and hopefully never will. For the pilots themselves, the jet is both a weapon and a burden. They are asked to make life or death decisions in seconds, using data streams that would overwhelm most of us. Their training, their trust in their jet, and their ability to stay calm in chaos matter as much as any radar spec sheet. Behind every fighter squadron is an army of people you never see in the headlines. Ground crew, technicians, weapons loaders, Stealth jets demand a different level of discipline on the ground. Panels must be aligned exactly right. Coatings must be inspected and repaired. Sensors need precise calibration. Imagine working night shifts on a freezing flight line, checking every inch of an F-35 or J-20. Any misaligned panel, any damaged coating, could mean a stronger radar echo and a higher risk for the pilot tomorrow. Weapons crews must carefully load missiles into internal bays, making sure doors close flush with the aircraft's skin. Fuel teams must coordinate turnarounds so jets can launch again and again under pressure. In Russia, China, and the West, these crews face similar stresses. Long hours, high expectations, the knowledge that a mistake on the ground might translate into a fatal vulnerability in the air. When we compare the F-35, Su-57, and J-20, we're really comparing three entire ecosystems of people, not just three airframes. The question becomes, which ecosystem can generate the most combat-ready sorties, day after day, under stress, without burning out its people or breaking its machines? Now let's play a thought experiment. Not realistic politically, but useful mentally. Imagine a neutral test range somewhere on the planet. No surface-to-air missiles. No ground radars. No AWACS. Just an F-35, a Su-57, and a J-20. All with well-trained pilots. At long range, the F-35's stealth and sensors probably give it the first move. If it can spot the others early, it might manage a silent ambush. If somehow all three close the distance and end up maneuvering in visual range, the Su-57's agility becomes extremely dangerous. Thrust vectoring, high angles of attack, brutal turns that could force an overshoot. The J-20 might try to avoid the tight dogfight, using its missiles and energy to stay slightly further out, picking windows to strike while the others are focused on each other. Would there be a single clear winner? Probably not. In some runs, the F-35 gets the first kill. In others, the Su-57 survives the merge and punishes someone who got too close. In others, the J-20 uses its reach to take out a distracted opponent. And that's the point. Even in a clean scenario, outcomes swing based on small decisions, timing, and luck. Now imagine adding the chaos of real war, with jammers, SAMs, and politics layered on top. Looking ahead, none of these jets will be the final word in air power. Sixth-generation programs are already on the horizon. The United States is working on NGAD, the Next Generation Air Dominance Program. Europe is pushing projects like GCAP and FCAS. China has hinted at its own sixth-generation ideas. Russia talks about future designs beyond the Su-57. These future jets will likely push stealth even further, but also lean harder into AI, manned-unmanned teaming, and electronic warfare. Think of a pilot less as the person flying a plane and more as the commander of a small aerial squadron of crewed and uncrewed systems. When those aircraft arrive, the F-35, Su-57, and J-20 will become legacy platforms. Still deadly, still relevant, but increasingly used alongside drones and newer jets that change the shape of the fight yet again. The question then becomes, which Air Force uses its fifth-generation jets as a bridge to that future? And which ones simply try to stretch them beyond their design horizon? If the F-35 keeps getting upgrades and strong drone teammates, it stays central for a long time. If the J-20 is paired with loyal wingmen and a dense sensor web, it becomes even more threatening in the Pacific. If the Su-57 can be integrated into a coherent future concept, it can still play niche but sharp roles. Drones are the other half of the future story, and they're already here. Picture an F-35 flying with a handful of expendable stealth drones. Some carry extra missiles. Some carry jammers. Some are just there to soak up enemy fire. Now imagine a J-20 doing the same, with swarming drones launched from ground sites or ships. They flood the sky with decoys and sensors, forcing the enemy to waste missiles on cheap targets. Or a Su-57 sending a drone ahead to fly a suicidal path through enemy radar coverage, lighting up every sensor in the network, while the manned jet stays back in a better firing position. In that world, the fighter versus fighter narrative gets even more blurry. Wins and losses will be decided by entire constellations of machines, not just the flagship jet at the center. This is why countries are experimenting with loyal wingmen programs and autonomous strike drones. It's cheaper to lose a robot than a pilot. And it's tactically powerful to have disposable assets that can scout, jam, and bait enemy defenses. So when we ask who wins F-35, Su-57, or J-20, we're really starting to ask a bigger question. Who builds the smartest mixed team of humans and machines, and who writes the best playbook for them? There's also a sobering side to all of this. Deterrence and escalation. High-end fighters like the F-35, Su-57, and J-20 are meant to prevent wars as much as fight them. They signal to potential rivals, "Are you sure you want to test this?" But the same technology that strengthens deterrence can also increase the risk of miscalculation. A stealth jet flying close to someone's border might be misread as the start of a strike. A radar contact that disappears could trigger panic in a tense command center. The faster and more complex these systems become, the more pressure falls on decision makers. They have to interpret incomplete information under enormous time pressure. Launch or hold. Escalate or de-escalate. In that environment, the human factor at the political level becomes as important as the pilot in the cockpit. Are leaders disciplined? Do they trust their own systems? Do they have communication channels to diffuse misunderstandings before they spiral? So when we marvel at the engineering behind the F-35, Su-57, and J-20, it's worth pausing for a moment. These jets are guardians and potential match starters at the same time. How wisely they're used will shape not just battles, but the stability of entire regions. Let's bring all of this together into a simple mental picture. The F-35 is the connected assassin. It wins by knowing more, seeing first, and firing from positions of advantage. Its power lies in its alliance, its software, its networks. The Su-57 is the specialist brawler. It promises high performance in tight, dangerous engagements and operates as a sharp tool in specific roles. Its strength is agility and the classic Russian focus on dramatic kinematic performance. The J-20 is the rising strategist. It reaches far, targets the support structure of enemy air power, and fits neatly into China's broader anti-access strategy in the Western Pacific. Which one is the best? The honest answer is, it depends what war you're talking about. And it depends who is flying, who is supporting, and who writes the rules of engagement. If you remember nothing else from this episode, remember this. Modern air combat is not a Top Gun duel over an empty ocean. It's a chess match played across radars, satellites, data links, and human minds. The F-35, Su-57, and J-20 are just three very impressive pieces on that board. As we close this deep dive, take a second to replay the opening image in your mind. Three shadows high above the clouds. American, Russian, Chinese. Now you know what sits behind those silhouettes. Not just engines and missiles, but industrial bases, training pipelines, doctrines, and political choices stretching decades into the past and future. You've heard how the F-35 tries to win before the fight begins, how the Su-57 turns the close-in merge into a lethal dance, and how the J-20 reaches for the high-value assets that keep modern air campaigns alive. In the end, you don't have to pick a favorite. You just have to understand what each one is for. Because understanding purpose is the key to understanding power. If you enjoyed this long-form breakdown, imagine what future episodes could explore. Carrier strike groups versus hypersonic missiles, submarines versus underwater drones, or the quiet, invisible war happening every day in the electromagnetic spectrum. For now, though, we'll leave our three fighters gliding back to base. Fuel low, mission data stored, ground crews waiting in the cold. Thanks for listening. Stay curious. And next time you see a headline about the F-35, Su-57, or J-20, you'll know there's a lot more to the story than just a picture of a jet.